In this case, probably would make sense to have someone managing it as an internal product, and probably you should also have some engineers that understand how to customize this type of product.
Try to define what success looks like. What I tell them is that, yeah, go to your clients, your customers, and ask them how they are evaluated, or what kind of feedback they would.
Hello there, here we are in another episode of Product Chronicles, the Brazilian way. I'm Joca.
Hi, I'm Fabio. Nice to be here.
And I'm Paulo Caroli. A pleasure to be here.
And today we decided to talk about internal systems, internal products, and why we create them, why we choose to develop them in-house instead of acquiring or subscribing to an existing solution, and also platform engineering or platform products. So there's a lot of topics for us to cover. So who wants to start and tell any interesting story? I heard that Fabio is working with a client that have some internal products, right?
Actually, I'd like to first, before I tell a story, I'd like to ask you a question. Why do you think that people started calling the internal platforms internal products, and what's the difference, or what difference should it make? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I was giving a talk last week or the week prior to a company, and we were discussing product culture. And then in the middle of the discussion, they asked me, "Oh, listen, we have here Salesforce. Should we call it an internal product? And how do we manage a Salesforce, our Salesforce implementation?" And I remember telling him that if it's a vanilla type of implementation, it's just a software that you have and you use like Google Workspace and things like that. But if you customize it, and Salesforce, the same as SAP, they allow companies to customize it a lot. And in this case, probably would make sense to have someone managing it as an internal product, and probably you should also have some engineers that understand how to customize this type of product. Does it make sense to ask for third parties to work on it? So to answer your question, as soon as we start to build internal tools instead of using vanilla implementations of existing tools, then it makes sense to start to call it an internal product. And the idea to use the internal product, the name product, is to use the techniques of product management that we normally use for customer facing products in internal products as well, to manage as a product, to understand our internal customers, our internal users, understand their pains, their problems, and understand how we can solve them with our internal product, internal system, and in a way that generates results to the company. So using the very traditional product management definition, which is we build products to solve a customer problem using technology in a way that generate results to the company. Use the same mindset for an internal product that probably won't be customer facing, but deserves to be treated as a product.
Okay. Joca and Fabio, I want to challenge you because you just gave the definition of product, and it's pretty interesting because when you give the definition of product, you talk about customer. So are you saying that the customer of our internal product is someone within your business? Or or are we making confusion here about in the words customer, client, user?
Yeah, here's the thing. It's the customer is the internal user for sure, because a product is a way to make that user, solve a problem, right? And generate some results in his life. So I believe that I've seen that before, and I consider it a mistake to not treat your internal users as customers, because they're actually even sometimes more important than external users. Because sometimes one very little optimization that it might do in an internal process will generate like millions in more in saved costs, for instance. And so sometimes it's even easier for you to have a good result treating your internal users as customers that have problems, and those problems as relevant problems that generate value for a company to solve, than just looking at the outside customers. So saying that, what I do is, yeah, of course, I consider them customers, but I try to make that bridge towards the result. It's not like, oh, you do the process XYZ, so I'm gonna do a system that does the process within a computer, because there's zero advantage in doing that, right? It's more about, okay, I'm going to optimize this process somehow and make it easier, make it I don't know. Usually, we talk about saving costs, right? So I'm gonna make it more cost effective, or in a given week you can do 50 of those operations, and I'm going to optimize the internal tools, so you might be able to do 5,000 of these operations per week, and then the company will make more money. So that's the rationale that I try to give.
Sure. No, no, I like it. And especially the finance that, and then the company will make more money. That's the thing about internal products. Like it is some intermediate step, but it is towards the business. It can never be in isolation. And that's the danger of internal product that doesn't matter, doesn't understand we're improving, but and then what? You gotta be able to answer and then what?
Yeah, I've seen people saying something like, oh, internal products are completely different because the user, well, they have to use the product, right? And I usually say, wrong. No, they don't. They don't. They're using paper, they're using post-its, they're using, I don't know, talking to people over lunch. They're using anything they can instead of using a bad product. I can tell you that many times, it's a secret of mine, but I can't reveal that secret here. That when I was traveling, I used to travel a lot, doing business, and sometimes the systems where you have to launch all your expenses, they're so overly complicated, like draconian ERPs that you have to know the code of your cost center, and like those horrible forms with like 20 different fields just for you to say, okay, I spent like $20 in a taxi. And usually what I did is that I just grabbed my receipts and send it over to finance, say, oh, I couldn't, I don't know how to do it. And they would be explaining to me. I'm like, oh, I can't, until they finally, to get rid of me. They'll just do the damn thing themselves and give me back my money, which is the only thing that I was interested in. Like, I'm not going to waste my time learning how to use a ERP, right? So what I mean to say here is not that I'm a dickhead, but rather that every internal user, will be able to kind of hack the system, or they will be encouraged to hack the system if the internal product is horrible. And I've seen that so many times. And so, in order not to gossip, I'd rather confess that I did it myself many times. But I've seen it happening with colleagues of mine as well. Like, the internal product is horrible. You just do achieve the same result in some other way.
Yeah, users are very creative. They figure out a way to to solve their problem. If your internal product is not helping them, they will figure out another way to solve it. I find the situation very common. And one question to both of you, um, for you to give your thoughts. is when we think about an internal product, we are thinking about an internal product that will be used by the rest of the company, the rest of the organization. But there is a special group of people in the company that may use internal products as well, that are the developers, the engineers. When we build the people have been calling it platforms. And have you seen this? Is this different from internal products for the rest of the company? The product for developers? People even call it the developer experience, to create a good developer experience. What's your experience on this type of internal product?
My take is it is a product in itself, and you gotta consider the user experience, in this case, the developer experience. Uh, and you gotta go. I'm thinking a lot from the Leanception, right? Because I've been in so many Leanceptions. Some of them are for final products, and some are internal products, and there were platform teams behind it. And the thought process, it is the same. You gotta think about the dev and the dev experience, and what is that internal API, whatever it is of the platform vision. What is the minimum viable product or architecture or platform or API for that thing. It's the same line of thought that we use for external digital products. But with one, I would add one more thing. I always think about the personas and their journeys. Whenever I am on an inception about internal product, the question comes: should we think about only the devs, or the users of the applications that the devs are building? My answer is like, think about both, you know, because somehow you need to understand you're building this for the dev and the devs use it for something else. So think about both, perhaps the user journey, understand both journeys, and then of course focus on the internal product. But it's very hard to only think about the internal product without understanding the context of that dev or that person that's using to build something for the external client, the external customers.
Yeah, there's actually something that I usually tell people when they're building internal products that they want to try to define what success looks like. What I tell them is that, yeah, go to your clients, your customers, and ask them how they are evaluated, or what kind of feedback they would, what causes a good feedback, or even better, what causes them to receive a bonus at the end of the year. And then you know exactly what the real interest is, because sometimes they're just gonna tell you, oh, I need that all of those features, so the product will be better. But I would much rather optimize that towards the professional looking good. Like I usually say that a good internal product, generates bonus or even a promotion and make the team look good. And that's the problem that we should try to build, and not just, oh, you ask for a functionality, here's your functionality, because that would, then we can call it a product, right? Because that's exactly what I try to do when I'm designing a product for the market. I try to design a product that's so good that the customer will pay me with pleasure, like, just, oh, okay, you solved a very good problem, a very important problem. So here's my money. You know, and of course, your colleagues and employees are not going to give you any money, but you can actually offer that, like, okay, I can measure your happiness without you paying me any money, by seeing if your staff, is receiving the bonus, if the feedbacks are good, if your sector or your area of the company is regarded as a place with great professionals and great work being done. So the product should be part of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, in terms of developer experience, I've since my time at local web, we used to have this platform type of team, and they were concerned about building products that made the other engineers more productive and able to build stuff faster. Like, for instance, authorization and authentication engines, or one-click deploy, or API infrastructure, things like that. And it's very, very helpful. And I remember, since the local app time, this team, they have a very interesting mindset. Their mindset is, we're gonna build stuff, but we will not force this stuff that we are building into people. If people find better solutions outside, they are free to use it. So our responsibility is to create something that is better suited for us than what exists outside the company. So that's an interesting mindset, especially on the developer experience type of internal product, right?
Yeah, you reminded me of the first product that I ever made. I Instead of doing a user interface from scratch, and the user interface, because of the nature of the product, should be a table, right? People would fill a table. So I just said, okay, we already have like a very, very fast interface, which lets us edit a table in the most optimal way, which is called a spreadsheet. So what I did is just use and I'm talking about the very beginning of the 2000s. So not even Google Sheet existed yet, you know. So it was all on top of Excel, but people needed to write things on the cells, right? So most of the target audience, the internal users, they were not using Excel in their daily lives. But I just told them, hey, it's gonna be so much faster for you to just learn the basics of Excel, just to go to the cells and fill the cells with the proper text. Than actually us designing a user interface in HTML that is eventually going to suck, and is going to be a lot slower. And they needed to work with like big spreadsheets, because it was lots of columns of text that would then build a multimedia out of that. So so I just said, yeah, let's test. So what we did is teach them how to use Excel, just the basics, just like filling a cell with text. So it was much more psychological, just to make them lose their initial fear of a spreadsheet. And then we did a kind of what's the name of the thing? I believe that was VBA at that point. No, Visual Basic, blah blah blah. Yeah, so it was like a macro that would grab all the spreadsheet and export an XML, out of it, and then we feed in the other system and so on. So what I did is that, yeah, just try and let's see what happens. So I let the team try to use that for a month, and a month later I said, hey guys, I've been talking to you, and I know that you've been sometimes frustrated with Excel. It's a little bit difficult. I agree. So what I'm going to do is, let's go back to the way that we used to do things before. Okay, let's not use the spreadsheet anymore. And the team was unanimous, saying, "No!" Everybody, shouted it, and I'm like, "Okay, I wanted to hear that." So, so what do you say? Really, like, you really want to stay with that? Like, of course, it's so much better. Blah 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 blah. And then I generated, that little psychological moment of the team realizing that they had crossed the threshold. After fear, they found like an amazing, or in their, not amazing, right? But faster or a more practical way of working, and they would much rather use that. And that's very important, that kind of validation. Of course, I was playing a little bit of a mind game. You don't need to do that, but I was just like, it was because of my own fear, right? That I was, am I forcing something into a team? Like, I was actually not sleeping very well with that. So I needed that moment. But apart from that, from the way you do it, it's really, really important for the team to support the solution, right? The team must be excited about the solution. And this is something that I'm I believe that you need that, because it's very frustrating to use something just because somebody demanded you to use that.
You sort of run a Sean Ellis test with your team, right? How much disappointed will you be if we shut
Exactly.
off the solution?
See, that was way before Chanel's, you know.
Exactly.
So
That's a
yeah,
good one.
I
But
was an
but
innovator.
but you know what? You bring an interesting topic to the discussion because when you set up an internal team, normally the internal team they want to develop new things. That's their reason to be, right? They are there to build internal products. And how do you manage the choice between building an internal tool or using one that exists off the
To
shelf, for
build or
instance?
buy. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
exactly the question I was gonna make you guys. Before building anything internal, you gotta make this decision to build
One
or to
word
buy.
for me, really. I'm gonna simplify the thing, but that's the if it's better for us to simplify the discussions, right? So in one word, costs. So you either buy or you're going to pay out man or person hours to your IT staff, you know, to your internal team to build it. So if the costs are kind of equal, you know, kind of the same, then you can put other things into discussion. But man, things like you guys probably remember when you needed to send emails by hand, right? You had a send mail server in your infrastructure, and then we needed to send it, and then the emails would go to spam, blah blah blah. I don't believe that anyone in the world right now, unless you know there are big technological companies, are not using a third party to send emails at this point, right? It's not like the cheapest thing ever to send emails, but I'm mentioning that because it's so basic. Every single product in the world sends automatic emails, and but you just realize that it's way cheaper to just use, you know, Resend or whatever, or Mailchimp or whatever you use to manage all of the costs associated with maintaining an email server, you know, and making and keeping it
But
healthy. Go ahead.
Fab, I think this discussion is deeper than this, only the cost point of view. Yeah, you got to think about the long-term vision strategy of the organization. You know, I'll give you an example. There's an article. It's an old article from Gartner on pace layered, and I really like that article for making decisions about building or buy. I'll try to summarize the article, right? There are like three layers. One is the innovation layer. The other is system of innovation. The other is system of differentiation and system of registry. What you're talking about, system of registry. If email is not your thing, that's a registry. You buy it, that's for sure. The big question mark comes to differentiating and innovation. And what I find quite interesting, differentiator, if your long-term goal is to differentiate in the market on that aspect you're handling, you better build. Because if you buy, you and everybody else have the same stuff. You know, it's like Google. I did spend 1 year in Google, and Google has a lot of internal products, and some of them they could have bought. But why did they build? Because that's their differentiator. How fast they put new products in the market. You know,
Actually, some of them they have bought, right? But they put Google
yeah, I know,
brand.
but they internalized.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
bought the company, not the product.
yeah, exactly.
Then it's mine. Because in their long-term vision strategy, that's their system of differentiator. So that gotta be in-house. So that's very important. Of course, for a small organization, your differentiator is very little. A lot of things you're buying and assembling together. But the one that I find more interesting is the system of innovation. And I learned this in Norway, one conference I went, because the government there puts together a lot of startups because things that are highly innovative, you should not build alone because there's too much uncertainty. And that you should collaborate with other people and expose open source, whatever it is. You know, once it's mature, you bring a house and then you build, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's totally agree because that's actually the reason why you built the company in the first place, right? You're trying to build something. But that being said, it's funny how many just to illustrate because I totally see your point, and we're talking about building technology, right? But usually the companies that are very not too much operation based, but rather technology or technological product based. They will want to build their technology or their core technologies. But it's funny because I've been in the e-commerce space, and it's funny to see that most of the e-commerces at this point, they do not have like internal platforms. They'd rather buy them, which is something that if you try to simplify too much the thought process, you just say, oh, the it's an e-commerce, so their thing is actually the commerce platform. So they will probably build, and that's not quite right. The e-commerce business is actually getting goods and making those goods, arrive at a fair price somewhere. So most of those guys, they actually invest a lot of money in the logistics internal software, and not exactly on the e-commerce platform. The e-commerce platform, they're more than happy to buy, no problem about it. So it's interesting. You need to analyze that with a magnifying glass.
It is true. I just I should not tell the name of the organizations, but I know people in both organizations. Both are like very famous shoe brands. One of them, their e-commerce is handled by a third party. And I know people that work there. It's an amazing system that guarantees high performance, all of this. The other one is an internal team, and I know people working there as well, And like two very similar organizations, different strategy. One gave their e-commerce to a third party and make sure it's high performance and everything that needs to be. The other hire a lot of people. I won't tell the country, then you figure out where it is, and have architects and OKR and a bunch of stuff, to make sure that things is up to date, high speed, and all of this.
Yeah,
Both are doing good.
but
Both are selling good.
but that's the thing. I'd be very curious about how well they're doing regarding their margin of revenue, because what you're talking about here is that one company considers that technology is their differentiator, right? And I don't know, coming from the
Yeah,
e-commerce
it is
space, I
true.
would say that's very rare.
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible,
Yeah.
but
No.
usually the differentiator is price, customer support,
Yeah.
and
No.
those things
Look,
related to operations.
looking from the perspective of this Gartner article, I would say that shouldn't be
Yeah,
your differentiator, your e-commerce, right?
yeah.
But let's take Amazon as an example and the AWS, right? They were a retailer and they figure out their stuff and then they open as a product. It's
Yeah, but that's the thing,
Yeah, that's a question that I want to bring, but I'm not sure if the noise here will allow me to do
No,
that.
no, go ahead.
But one question that is quite interesting. I see this pattern happening a few times. You just mentioned Amazon. Amazon, they are an e-commerce, right? They are the everything store, and they build an amazing infrastructure, and they got to the point that they realized that this amazing infrastructure that they had could be offered to the world as a product, as a standalone product. And I know some companies. I'm working with a cybersecurity company right now, and they are a consultancy company and a cybersecurity consultancy company, and they built an internal system to help them manage this service. And now they are realizing that this internal system that they built could be offered as a product to the world. And do you see this happen? Is this a pattern that can happen normally in companies? Like you build an internal product and you figure out your internal product is so good that it solves not only your problem, but it could also solve the problem for other companies, other clients.
uh,
That's how I
well,
started my career. I built an internal tool. I realized that there was a market for it. Then, I just left the company and started working on the tool. So I would say, yeah, but most businesses, they're not organized, towards doing that. But I would say from the product perspective, 100%. Every product should aspire, to say, okay, this internal product is so good that if you went to the market, it would make a killing there. I wish I could say that about all of my internal products.
yeah. But I, I don't know. It depends. Those examples that we use, I think they are the exceptions. Because in my point of view, if you look at the metrics, right? I'll take Google as an example. One of their products, external product, YouTube, Gmail, has billions of users. Their internal product for their teams has hundreds of, thousands of users, like for developers and everything that helps in the coding, infrastructure, all of this. But it's another magnitude, you know? And the same for small organizations. You build a product for external product, thousands of users, internal, hundreds. I think it's a different market. Even the metrics you look at are totally different. So that transition from being internal to opening to external, I think it's a very niche market, and
I
sometimes
wouldn't say so. You're talking about B2C, and so if you talk about B2B, I wouldn't say that's true, Caroli, because then I'm talking about, okay, I have one client, which is my own business, right? But when you start in a B2B market, you start with what? Two clients, maybe, then five,
yeah,
then
yeah,
10, you know?
yeah, and it
So
is external, yeah,
yeah,
and it's low
so
numbers as
so
well.
Google is a very, very peculiar example
Yeah,
because
yeah,
their internal products are actually they're also B2B, of course, but they're kind of B2C.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is true. That's the example I was exposed to, and I saw, you know, their platform to sets like it's amazing, and they're always building it. Besides building external products, like their attention to internal things are like I was like, wow, I had no idea how important it was, and to be honest, like after being there years ago, I see the benefits, right?
Yeah, I usually say, that's building a very good product is almost as expensive as building a crappy one, you know.
That's a good one.
We should not save like in on the details on the doing proper research, doing proper discovery. We're talking about saving I don't know, maybe 10 hours of work. Don't do it, use those 10 hours of work or 20 hours of work in order to have an amazing internal product.
Yeah, but then you go back to the build or buy, right? If you're a very small company, don't have a lot of budget, you gotta buy as a service, especially now software as a service. If you're bigger enough, you gotta make that decision.
Focus your energy on your core product, your core business, and leave the rest for existing solutions, right? And going back to the beginning, as Fabio was mentioning, uh, when we talk about internal products, is using the tools and the principles of building products the same as we use for customer facing for internal products as well. They deserve this, right? They deserve to be treated as a product, to use the tools, the principles, um, to pay attention to the users and have the users really love your internal product, love to use your internal product. As Fabio mentioned, using the Chanelis prior to Chanelis. So we're gonna turn off. No, no, please don't turn it off. So that's the main message here. So I guess we cover a lot of ground here. I don't know if you wanna end anything else.
Do you know what, Joca? I want to add one more complexity here. Um, I worked with Shamak, and she wrote the book on data mesh, and she popularized the concept on data products. And that's quite interesting because a data product is 100% internal product. You know, it's a product where I'll try to simplify it. Like think about microservice or API. It's a microservice or API plus data that you provide to other people in your organization to have that information very well organized, and then you can combine a few data products, and then you have better analytical insights and data to your business people, to whoever needs to make smarter decisions. That's all about internal products, right? And those and I've been following some organizations that start in these organize the data, being data mesh, data factor, or whatever, get the data more organized years ago. Now their speed of development and answering business important insights and questions are much faster. You know, so it is really important. Not even the concept of a digital product. It is really important to improve the ability to answer questions or get insight from your own data really fast. you know. So
Totally
especially
agree.
large
Totally agree.
organizations, you gotta take care of your data and how you access and get good information from your
Yeah,
data. You know.
data internal product is key. I remember when I was at local web, we didn't have a data internal product team, so we depended on a BI team to generate
Oof,
whatever reports we needed, and
bottleneck, you know.
it
It's a huge
was
bottleneck.
awful. And
Yeah, yeah.
then when I moved to Contazo, we decided to install a system called Metabase. I don't know if you know Metabase. Metabase is a very interesting interface to data. The earlier versions, you still have to run queries, SQL queries, but nowadays it's completely easier to generate dashboards and charts and things like that. It's amazing. I remember when I first got to know the metabase, our internal metabase, and I started to play with it, I during a whole week I started to go to sleep like 2 or 3 a.m. because it was so fun to have the power to generate your own dashboards, your own analysis. And then we played with it a little bit inside the product team, and then we released into to the whole company, and it was transformational. The company got transformed by the
Totally
power
agree.
to be able to run
Yeah,
their own
yeah.
questions on data. It's really transformational. That's a very good point.
I think every single business person should never have to wait to have a report or information in front of them. That thing that happened on the past, hey, I need a report that show me this, and this. No, you know. Somehow the data gotta be available for that person, already organized. I don't care, one data product, two data products, whatever it is, whatever you wanna call it. But data gotta be organized and available. So the person builds their report really, really fast and in a simple way.
And now with Gen AI, it's even easier the interface. I just want a report that give me. Oh, I don't even need to say a report. Hey, I want to know how many customers use this and that, and it will generate the information for you.
But now the pressure goes in organizing the house, right? The data, having the data organized.
I was gonna say that there's a one thing that we didn't cover that I just realized, and it's really important because it's one of the arguments that try to prove, that internal products are so much different from external, which is, oh, actually, internal products, you don't need a backlog because the stakeholders will ask you for functionalities, and they will demand them, and they are the boss of your boss sometimes. So you need to do it. So it's not even so don't it doesn't matter if you have all of the product framework, if you will, like with backlogs and Kanban, whatever. They want the functionalities that they want. And so many times I had to fight that mentality. Have you heard that before? How do you fight that?
Definitely, definitely. That's a very tricky one because they think that it's an internal product, so it should serve the company. So the company is the one who defines what needs to be built. But that's definitely not the way. And again, I would advise the same advice that I give earlier. Internal products, they deserve to be treated as product the same as customer facing products, so they should also have a vision. So where do you want to get with this internal product? And you should also have a product strategy. How are you going to get there to that product vision? So those two are very important tools we need to use the same way as we use for customer facing products. We should use them for internal products, and that would be my advice to counter this type of mindset in certain organizations.
Yeah, it's true. But it's a hard one. Your customer is your boss. How
Yeah,
do you handle it?
I'm actually and just to tie things up, and even talking a little bit about data, I'm working with a client that that's pretty much the case. Like they have several internal products, and I'm helping them find their vision. And and what happens is that those products they need to be internalized because they're highly specific for the company's operation. And they kind of invented the operation. It's a very peculiar operation, so they needed to do it themselves. But then what happens is that the vision that they have for the products, all of them, is we're going to automate the operation that people are doing by hand and maybe, scribbling post-it notes, and now everything's going to be done in a computer. And that's as far as the vision goes. And I've seen that so many times as well. Like the people believe that automation is a benefit in itself, and usually I just tell them, hey, first thing, automation is not even a benefit. Sometimes it's a hurdle, it's an obstacle, because people don't want to use computers sometimes. Maybe they will be more comfortable with paper and whatnot. So one of the arguments that I'm trying to use to lead them towards a vision, and I'd like other ideas, is the realization that when we automate a process, sometimes the benefit is not going to the operator of the process, but rather for the people that we will extract data out of the past processes. Because when we automate things, we generate data, right? We generate information about what happened. When you scribble on a paper, you're not generating any kind of data because that gets lost ultimately. So how those companies usually work is that there is that guy, 30 years doing that operation. That guy knows everything, and then he retires, and everything gets lost, right? So when we automate, what you can do is actually generate intelligence. So I'm trying to build a vision of the products based on that. Like, what kind of intelligence do you need to build for this product to be useful? And I've been struggling with that because that's a little bit too evolutionary for them, right? They were thinking about the operators, and now I'm telling them to think about the company as a whole and what kind of intelligence will come out of that product that the company as a whole can use to optimize their own business. And that's a very convoluted rationale, even though I realize that that's one good course of action. So I don't know if you have comments on that or you could expand on that.
Yeah, I would say it's like when we create a user journey or a customer journey, is the as is and to be. And sometimes you automate the as is, but like you're not thinking about the to be scenario. That's the danger of automation.
What is the to be scenario?
That- That's exactly start from the vision, and then think about the strategy, and then figure out. But when you start from the as is and you automate, uh, unless the future is exactly like the past, it won't be the best solution.
Sometimes the good old technique of the five whys could help. Why are we doing that? Because you're going to automate something that maybe is there for a lot of years, but it made sense like 10 years ago, but it doesn't make sense now. So maybe the five whys could help uncover the root problem that you wanted to solve 10 years ago that maybe now it doesn't make sense and it's
Yeah,
not a problem.
no,
It's
totally. Yeah.
yeah, so maybe
And
that
reused, right? Like it's like the monkey thing, that the monkey with the banana that you throw water on them, and like that experiment, and then you change the monkeys and no one reaches for the banana anymore because it's they're afraid of getting cold water on them. Same thing in large organizations. We keep on doing stuff because it was done like this before, until come an external consultant like Fabio or me or you and like, hey, why are you doing this way? I don't get it.
Yeah, sometimes I think that my client feels that I'm driving them backwards, like we're not going the right direction because I'm actually asking them, okay, why do you have that product? And they're like, well, they shrug it away. Like, of course we need that product. Like they're not used to question this. And I'm not even saying that the products are not well done, but it's more like, why do you have the process? What were okay, the process is mandatory, but how do you know that the process is good for the company? What are you measuring that shows that the process is a success or not? Done, not done, yeah, it's gonna get done eventually, like with a product or without. But what kind of data can we extract to learn how to do that better? Somehow. So I don't know. That's my current struggle. It's very interesting to think about those things, but and also how you can convince people that internal products they also need that degree of philosophy.
And you know what? I will bring AI again to the discussion because with generative AI, it becomes easier to automate things that, again, as Fabio mentioned, shouldn't be automated. I was yesterday in a conference and a speaker mentioned about a case, a very interesting case of a group of people that use it to open tickets to the support team. And now with generative AI, what they decided to do is to open tickets to the AI and have the AI answering the tickets instead of the support team. It makes sense because that's the process. But then they dig deeper into this process and they realize why were they asking to the support team to do stuff or to solve things? Because they didn't have access to the tool to do themselves. So the solution was not to build the AI to reply to the tickets, but actually to give the requesters a proper tool to do their work. So that's why we need to keep asking why and why and why and figure out the what's happening underneath the problem, right? Underneath the process. Maybe the process is outdated.
And the other lesson is, read your internal tickets, guys. For God's sake, go be curious. Take a look at your support team,
Exactly.
see what they're trying to solve, because there's so much knowledge to be gathered there.
Exactly. Now I guess we covered a lot of ground, right? We covered a lot of ground on internal systems, and what I've seen people come to me and say, "Hey, listen, I find a lot of literature about B2C products. Now we're starting to see some literature about B2B products, but no one talks about internal products. I've seen some books about platform products, but internal products in general, I haven't seen that much." So here we are. Hope we were able to cover some ground with this episode. And well, this is it. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.
See you.
See you.